Ladies and gentlemen, good evening once again. Good evening to all of you. In international news, the situation in Ukraine is becoming serious to the extent that the Deputy Chief of Staff of the Ukrainian Army has just made unprecedented revelations. He made revelations to the Americans regarding the strategy that Russia is currently employing, and that by 2026, Russia will have taken back all of Ukraine. By the end of 2026, in other words, if they do not manage to take back all of Ukraine, Ukraine will no longer be able to exist as it does now. It's not the Russians who are talking. Russia is simply doing its job. But the general staff of the army, that's the higher level. It is the general staff of the army that is making this revelation. And in what context is this revelation being made? It's in the context of alerting Western partners so that they can snap out of their lethargy and take action. So, what exactly is happening? What strategy is Putin? Is Russia currently using? It's a strategy. Now, if you miss this part, you won't understand the rest of the developments in the special military operation on the Ukrainian side. Let's dive deeper, ladies and gentlemen. But make sure to share the video conference and give it lots of likes. Don't forget to click subscribe. Subscribe massively. Invite your friends to subscribe. Africa must stay informed and have access to good information. That's what allows us to make good choices, to decide, to make the right decisions. So according to the official information, this gentleman, what's his name again? I'll find his name in a moment. This gentleman, his name is not Paul. There you go. His name is Pavlo Palisa. Pavlo Palisa is the Deputy Chief of Staff to the Ukrainian President. The statements highlight what Kiev sees as Moscow's true intentions, far beyond mere peace talks. In other words, they themselves have observed, they themselves have understood that the peace talks are just a facade. So, the first point of the Russian strategy, from 2020 to 2026, they want to cut off, or at least they want to occupy the east of the Dnieper. So a large part of Ukraine, they want to occupy it entirely. Russia's main objective would be the total control of Ukrainian territories located east of the Dnieper River. This includes crucial regions such as the Donbass. There are crucial regions that are part of this section of the Dnieper. And as you've seen, every time I'm giving the 24-hour report, it always ends with the units, the groups stationed along the Dnieper. It's a river. So this includes crucial regions, namely the Donbass region, the Luhansk area, and the Donetsk region, but also potentially the oblasts of Zaporizhia and Kherson, located on the eastern bank. Therefore, such an advance will consolidate Russian control over these already partially occupied areas and would create a vast buffer zone to the west of the territories already annexed. This is one of Russia's primary objectives, to take these three major regions, the Donetsk Oblast, Zaporizhia, the Donbass. Yes, just imagine. Even according to the Deputy Chief of Staff, Russia already partially occupies these territories. Russia wants to take the rest, complete the takeover, and integrate them into its buffer zone. But this is a vast territory, a large perimeter. This is starting to validate the map put forward by Dmitry Medvedev, the Deputy Chairman of the Russian Security Council, who had released a map to show that this area is supposed to be the buffer zone. And we saw just a small part, a tiny corner, which happens to be the territory that will belong to Ukraine. Let's go deeper. What else do they want to do? At point two, what is the Russian strategy? It's to cut off access to the Black Sea. Now, that is the worst possible decision. To completely cut off Ukraine's access to the Black Sea so that Ukraine cannot reach the Black Sea. But this is a central element of their strategy. A central element of this strategy. This is an economic and military objective of the highest importance, it must be said. By cutting Ukraine off from its ports, these are vital seaports. The Black Sea, those are Ukraine's vital seaports. There's the port of Odessa. What other port is there? So, if Russia manages to do this, Russia will suffer. Russia will suffocate. There you go. I finally got it. That is to say, what is asphyxiation? To stifle. Russia will stifle Ukraine's economy and foreign trade, especially grain exports, and this will significantly weaken Ukraine's economic sovereignty. It will also turn the Sea of Azov into a Russian inland sea. So, the Sea of Azov will become a Russian inland sea, over which Russia will have complete control. And it is also a sea of extremely significant economic importance. Let's go a little further. The third strategy or third military objective by 2026 is the establishment of a buffer zone. They had already talked about this. So in addition to major territorial ambitions, the Deputy Chief of Staff mentioned the Russian plan to create a border buffer zone by 2000 by the end of the year. This will aim to secure the borders of the occupied and annexed territories, thus pushing back the Ukrainian forces. Ladies and gentlemen, this creates disillusionment among the Ukrainians. And on top of that, in any case, it confuses them. And that's why a warning is currently being issued by the General Staff of the Ukrainian Armed Forces. But how many times are they going to sound the alarm? They sound the alarm. And they are Western allies to their best. They are human beings too. God Almighty is not going to come down from heaven to tell Zelensky, stop that, my boy. Impossible. So, this is the situation Ukraine is facing. And so, ladies and gentlemen, that was the top story in international news. Thank you for sharing it as much as possible. I'll be back with more news shortly. That was the voice of your one and only samurai,